This session is about you guys. So we want to find out what are your obstacles in the practice or in yoga or life or I don't know. And we want to try to answer that. And I invite you, if you have a question, to unmute yourself and ask that. You can probably also put your video on or not, however you feel. If this is really not your thing, just type into the chat. That's also fine. I already put some playlists. That's all playlists we have for the Yin practice. So you can use them for self-practice. And yeah, we want to have it open. So you have to come up with something. Otherwise, it will be very silent.
And we are meditation and Yin teachers, so we can be silent for the whole time.
And we are also only children. You know, somehow it makes a difference, I think, because you have so many hours, even as a child, to occupy yourself with anything. Just look at that paper that Cedric was holding and be like, oh, what else is on it? What's going on? No, is it square? No, it's not square.
The title of this was for beginners, so I assume some of you in here are beginners to Yin Yoga or interested in information or how we would answer that stuff. But you can ask other things as well. So curious to see what brought you guys into this session.
I'm kind of just hanging out in the session to glean as much knowledge from anybody and everybody as I can.
Yeah, I thought there might be some people just like curious.
Yeah.
That's also totally okay.
It's interesting what Athena said about being an only child as well, because I'm an only child, so I can totally relate to that. You've got so much time by yourself.
I'm with Athena and yourself on that one of being an only child. And it's really easy just to be on your own and just like, you know, entertain yourself, and you never get bored, do you? So like, and you can just be in your own silence, and it's like really beautiful.
Do you find Yin Yoga easy to tap into because of that? Or
yeah. My mom was great because she used to buy me lots of creative stuff when I was a kid, and I would just disappear for hours in my room and come out and have created this like mad thing, and she'd just be like, okay, which is like beautiful. So I think Yin is like a really nice practice for, you know, you don't have siblings. And I notice, you know, friends who do have siblings find the need to be entertained a lot more by other people than when you're, you know, an only child. I've really seen this difference quite like dramatically. Like,
or find the need to find something quiet to do also.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But they seem to be more social and more, or want to be in the company of people, I think. So
Ari, do you have a tree in your house?
I do, yeah. Currently, I am in Mexico. I was speaking with Athena earlier on Instagram. So I was in Saranda before that, and I'm headed back there in September. But I've been in Mexico 6 months. It is a tree. I have the same plants as you guys too, dangling down off the tree. So this is a yoga space here. So it's very nice.
Looking for insights to better help beginners in the practice.
Yeah, we could talk about maybe as teachers, if the practitioners don't have any specific questions, if teachers and Matthew, maybe if you have some questions, like we could all chat about how we teach beginners.
Another, yeah.
Well, I didn't really have as many questions as much as, you know, just if there were people here who had, you know, inquiries. I find from guiding beginners, one, I think it's reassuring to them that this practice is low and slow, and with language, it's important to let them know, as we often share in our classes, allow, give yourself permission, right? Notice. But it's things of just overcoming the hurdles of people, this concept, irrespective of either side of the asana practice, right? Where people say, well, I'm just not flexible, and moving people into this allowance for whatever is there. But it's, if it's specific postures, for instance, I kind of joke in class that I don't teach shoelace that often because I don't like the pose. And so it is something where, again, it's not around, it's through, right? So I've made it a practice lately to teach shoelace. And I'm very vulnerable in my classes and talk about the shape of my body, something that TJ talked about in terms of just anatomically, sometimes, the shape of your bones and things may not allow you, even no matter how hard you push, that, there's just certain limitations that your body may have, but it's also mental and physical, emotional. So I've been very vulnerable in my classes in terms of saying, well, you can look at me as an example of here's where my limits are, right? And so I'm not going to push myself, or if I notice my back gets a little tweaked when I open up into amphibian pose, right? So I just say, well, I'm going to ease my knee down toward my foot because I got triggered, right? So I try to share my own experiences in the class. And so I think that as guides, it's important to share and be vulnerable and to let people know, hey, I'm human too. And if you're looking for me for some expression inspiration, you're looking in the wrong direction. And because this is all I got. And so I think people are reassured with that and maybe comforted by the fact that that the people who are up front of the class or moving around in this space are just like them, right?
I
Yeah,
also
I like
find
that.
very, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I also find very valuable the idea behind what beginner means to people. So often if a class is named beginner's class, I often I don't care so much for the answer myself, but more for the people to come to the separation of, am I considering myself a beginner because my mind is too busy? Am I considering myself a beginner because my body is too stiff? Am I considering myself a beginner just because I've been to classes a few times, but actually I can really tap into sensations and I can really relax my mind? Like, what is each person's idea of being a beginner?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, actually, I'd never thought to break it down in that way. Like,
Yeah.
like what are the different dimensions of us that we are categorizing as beginner?
Because many people are, super flexible, and not only in yin, also in other types of yoga. They can do so many postures, and that doesn't necessarily make them an advanced practitioner if they're not able to tap into how they're feeling and observe and be mindful, and being able to do splits may not make you an advanced practitioner. It may be something you do or something you don't do.
And especially if you're flexible, sometimes it holds you back, or if you're good in something, it holds you back to tap into those obstacles that arise for some other people, or that arise when you have a problem or when you have to face something. And if it's just flowing, then it can be a beautiful experience. There's nothing wrong with that. But where we learn the most is often when we get into our limit, which is sometimes the body, which is often in the mind, or everywhere. Can be everywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, actually, yeah.
When we step back and allow ourselves to take some kind of help from others, like Ari saying, even as a teacher, she says she still feels like a beginner, as there's always the opportunity to learn.
I like the idea too that Matthew touched on with like modeling almost like narrating the internal monologue out loud, so students can hear like, now what I'm feeling right now is this, and that's why I'm adjusting, because like it's just kind of a natural quality of not being telepathic that like the only way we can identify what teachers are modeling is by looking at them. And when you look at a teacher, you think, oh, I need to be able to do it like they're doing it. And it's often not modeled enough, like because we can't really model our injuries. Like we don't have big signs that say like knee broken, that's why we're not doing saddle today. Like, or that's why I'm not demoing this all the way for you. Like, so making sure that we're, as teachers, kind of saying out loud, like, these are my limitations, these are my injuries. I have them, you have them, we all have them. It's not like all the cover of Yoga Journal.
One of the things that I shared in class yesterday is something that a very good friend of mine and longtime teacher, when I was taking one of her yin yang workshops, and it was just a beautiful expression. It's very so simple, but in yin classes, particularly for beginners, she said, see if you can find the place between caution and courage, right? So it's that space between where you're efforting and you're trying to almost push yourself beyond what feels like the natural edge or the stopping point. And it's, you know, just for me, it's the thing of inviting students to tune in, to check in, to see if they're present in their body or if they're performing the pose, right? So when you move into performance is when you overextend. And to Cedric's point about some people are hyper flexible, right? So I've had some people who, no matter how far they're down in the pose, they've got nothing. And so I try to give them some modifications, but I also just say, can you just enjoy the space and the peace of this moment and just be still? And, you know, maybe that's your practice. And so it's not always about, you know, hitting these hard edges. It's about finding the smooth edges within, right? So it's discovering where you can find the stillness, because sometimes the mental churn is the challenge I find for a lot of students in the class. It's a hard time for them to be still. They can move to the edge of their capacity within a stretch. It's just the fidgeting that comes from thinking and tapping. And sometimes I have to watch the music because their fingers are tapping on the floor, and I'm like, all right, be still, you know. But I try to move away from using words like fidget and things like that. I just, you know, invite yourself into stillness. That was just what came to mind. It's really that, you know, it's that thing for beginners to know that in yin, you're going to encounter resistance, but let's call it what it is. It's discomfort, right? So that is the challenge, to see if you can breathe into that space. And if it's too much, then back away, right? We're not training for Cirque du Soleil, right? So it's just not an endurance test, right? So those are the things I try to encourage students with.
It's interesting too, like sometimes you kind of have to paint a picture for students to understand like what advanced might mean. And because a lot of times people just think, like, I think a few of you mentioned like, oh, the real flexibility is the advanced, like they just default to that because of society maybe. But like, I always like to say, like, imagine two people and you have one person who folds in half in a forward fold and their head touches their knees, but they have no awareness of what's going on in their body. They're just able to do that. And they're not thinking about what they feel or where their thresholds are or what's going on with tension and compression in the tissues. And the other person is sitting upright. That's as far as they can go. There's no folding forward happening. They're just sitting upright. And that's all kinds of tension happening in their body and their hamstrings, but they're fully like tapped into it, and they're watching it and observing it and feeling it. And they're in touch with their experience of their body. And it's like, which one's the advanced one? It's the one that's in touch with their body. Like the one that's the advanced yin practitioner. And like, which isn't to say one is better or worse, but in terms of what the practice is trying to bring you towards is a real awareness and respect for your body, rather than just being like, this is just what I do. It's what everybody puts on covers of yoga magazines. So I guess that's the advanced. So like painting that picture of like person A and person B, like it's not about the visual. I find sometimes lands well with beginners.
I like to refer in the beginners and advanced category into times of practice, because it's, as we all agree, not on how flexible or how we cannot measure that so much, but we can see how long have we tried and how long have we practiced. And that's somehow, for me, a good quality to see if I am going towards an advanced or if I am still very beginner. And in the word beginners is the word begin. So I just begin a practice which has a different, because I haven't done it often, I don't have much experience. And if we say advanced, we could also say experienced. So beginners and experienced would be like nice words, because I have a lot of experience. I tried many things and I figured out what is good for me. So I like this distinction a little bit better.
I don't know if you found when you started meditation that the first, like, I don't know, for me, the first few sessions were just incredible. And then there was a plateau where not much is happening. And then again, as the time is passing, then it starts being more it. But there was a time where I guess because of the first sessions, there was more expectation, or there was more something. And I guess that really goes well with the idea of, yeah, I've tried it, and it's not just that it happened for me, that I could relax in that posture. Actually, even on a bad day, I can relax in that posture, or I am more likely to come towards relaxing in that posture. And if I don't, I'm still okay with it. You know?
That reminds me to a picture I often validate in my life experience. When you start something, you often have a glimpse of almost the divine, a glimpse of how it is to be on the mountain and have this beautiful view of the village and the sea and whatever you're looking at. So you have this panorama, and then at the second and third and fourth practice, suddenly you feel like, why do I don't come back into this state of mind, or however, to this view? And then I like to see it as you start then, because you do it consciously, and you start in the village, in the valley, and you start slowly climbing up bit by bit. And that's the practice. And it sometimes takes a long time until you reach that point again, which you had at the first time you tried. Because the first time you have no clue, and you just follow with intuition, and you're there.
And you're happy
Not
when
always,
you
but
are
sometimes
2 meters higher, because then you've never seen 2 meters higher. So.
And often those glimpses, I think they happen for a reason, that we actually experience where we want to go. And that's a beautiful like mechanics, because then we have an idea, wow, this practice that opened my mind so much. But then I have to practice to do that under my control. I actually know how to open my mind that much, or how to relax my body that much, because I have practiced it for a long time now. And somehow this analogy is something that happened to me often, and I like to see it in that way. I actually would have a question to the other teachers here. What do you think, what cue or what line, or what do you say to people? What do you think is the best, or is your favorite line in a class you teach? Like the most impactful line? Because I have a line I say, like, Yin Yoga is the space of allowance. And that's something, because I feel so good when I say, I am now in a space of allowance. And I would be curious if you have a line you say every time you teach a class, or which always comes up again, or what do you imagine like works well?
Mine is bring your awareness to your breathing. It's the only one where I'm just like, that has to be in there over and over and over and over.
Yeah, I agree on that.
I love saying relax your face. The space around your eyes, your mouth, even the ears.
Because you're smiling all day.
Yeah, I find that naturally I rest in an engaged position somehow. So I have to be consciously switching these off, to be like, well, no one is watching. I don't have to give them feedback that everything is okay. I can actually relax my face.
Mm-hmm. I often say, notice if you're trying. Right? Notice if you're trying to do the pose. Right? So allow your body. Talk to Cedric's point. I often use the word permission and allow, but often through the class, we're just checking in. But it's notice if you're trying. If you're trying to go deeper, if you're trying to create some magical depth or so-called expression of the pose, your body will guide. So turn the mind off and let the body speak. And so just listen to your body.
I also recognize the difference if I know I'm watched. So for example, if there are people and I'm presenting a pose, it's something completely different, or
demoing in a class,
demoing,
in
or
my
if
class, for
I see
example.
some other people like watching me.
Yeah.
And if I'm just a participant somewhere in the corner, I feel so much better because I stop to try.
That's because sometimes we demo for each other. So I guess that's the example, like that
Yeah.
someone would be
Or at
watching
the
you.
training or something.
Yeah.
One thing I also try to, I don't know if you say remind or introduce, is allow yourself to feel what's present, right? So even though I announce a target for a pose, you may feel it in another part of your body, and that's perfectly fine. Again, let your body speak, because sometimes when we don't feel it, that's when we start efforting, right? So we're trying to create the resistance, as opposed to just noticing where we stop. And then all of a sudden, maybe we're in forward fold and your shoulders start to feel heavy and achy because you're relaxing them. Let your awareness go there, as long as you're internal. And to TJ's point, if you find that your mind wanders, come back to your breath, and then let your awareness expand from the breath outward to just to notice what the dominant sensation. There's no wrong. There is no wrong. And so I try to remind students there is no wrong. So whatever you feel is meant to be felt. Right. So allow yourself to feel it and don't judge it. Don't hook into the backstory about why you're feeling it. Was that janky pillow that my neck is now bothering me? It's just, it is, let it be. And so it's just a reminder. It's so, that's that kind of borderline where some people will often say that my classes feel meditative. I know it came up before where I think it was Sarah in one of the previous talks about, labeling it as restorative and the difference between yin and restorative yoga. But it can be a restorative practice, right? You can feel renewed and rejuvenated and restored. So I try to just kind of get out of the way. A lot of times I say what I need to say. I teach my classes much more like I do my restorative, which is give some instruction in the beginning and get out of the way. Give some subtle reminders somewhere through and get out of the way. Because again, if people's minds are so used to processing, every time they hear a verbal cue, they jump right back up, right? So it's the balance for us as guides, right? To know that it's, we're here to guide. It's just like a recipe. My wife's a chef, right? So she's the guide, but it is your choice. You know your own palate. So if you like things spicier, you add more spice. If you don't like salt, reduce the salt. I'm just here to guide you, not
You just
direct.
said about the allowance of, what is actually there for you. And together with the idea of the beginner, if someone ever comes and says, oh, my body's so stiff, I've decided to answer in a very specific way, pretty much 99, if not 100% of the time. How lucky are you? If you're doing any posture, you can actually feel your body without having to get into a pretzel kind of shape. Like you bend and you feel it, you twist and you feel it. What a bliss is that you can feel your body at any point.
That's from a very flexible person's perspective.
Yeah,
But it's beautiful. I agree on that. And I'm the opposite. Like I have to work a lot to get flexible, and I feel immediately. And there's just this mind always telling me, you're not flexible enough. And so I work the other way around. But what you say is actually true. I can feel so quickly something in my body, and I love that. There was a point in my practice where it switched from achieving to loving, just to be in a moment and to feel whatever is there without going anywhere. And for me, this is really the essence of yin. If we see it as yin and yang, yin is not going to an aim. Yin is opening the space and experiencing. And yang is focused and achieving and having a goal. And yeah, that can be beautiful.
I like what Matthew was also saying about as a teacher getting out of the way. So like all of that space and things can be experienced by the students, and it it brought to mind like this idea that like in a way you're trying to get to maybe old friends to meet, or strangers. Like the student, their mind and awareness and their body are like two separate beings, you know? And I don't know if anyone else has had this experience, but like growing up, like my family would get like a new dog or a new cat or something, and I'd have to kind of introduce the two, so that like the dog would be like, oh, okay, this cat's okay. Or the cat would be like, oh, okay, this dog's okay. And the way I would do it I'd sit in between them, and I would pet one and I would pet the other and get them both to calm down. And then slowly like the cat would come over to like rub against me, like, oh, hello. And be like, okay, now you're closer to the dog. And then and you'd get them closer to closer, petting them the whole time. And that's kind of what it feels. But like it's not about you. Like they're already kind of like, they came there and they're like, yeah, cool, what's happening? It's about getting them to like be okay with each other. And it feels like that with like students in Yin Yoga, where it's like, you know, you're kind of like getting like the student's mind and the student's body to be like, hey, you guys are both okay with each other. And then you slowly just back away and are like, now you guys are friends again. So anyway, that's what Matthew was saying about like kind of not being there in a way as a teacher.
Speaking as a student, one of the things I love that my teacher, well, what my main Yin teacher does is she always says that if you can't get into this shape, it doesn't matter, just go with what you feel like, go with what your body is telling you. So again, this is kind of what Matthew was saying earlier. So I always appreciate that sort of thing from my teacher.
Yeah, it's such a skill in itself as a teacher to be like, hey, it's all okay, like you're okay, and to kind of not try to impose anything on students.
Well, there is a question in the chat.
We have a question.
Hi, everybody. Beginner's question. Smile. I am learning Yin Yoga just from videos and book, and I haven't found the information. If women can practice when they have their period, what poses to avoid, etc., or if it's just listen to the body. Thanks for the answer. So what would the guys say on that? Like from what you have read maybe or heard, and then I can say my personal experience.
I feel I have no possible way to like comment. I don't actually know. I really don't.
Okay, there's a lot of did you hear the question?
Yeah, I heard it. Yeah.
Well, I think that as a yoga instructor, it's important for these words to be spoken. I don't know, right? And so often we always want to say we know everything, and so I look for the feedback from women in my class to give me feedback, or other teachers. So often we're afraid to say I don't know the answer, but let me find an answer for you. So I usually see that as a challenge. So to Lucia, I see that as a great question, and I actually want to learn from your experience to say I didn't feel comfortable in this pose, or if I were twisting across my core, or if it was elevating through, supported through my psoas stretch and lifting my hips and extending my pelvis. I want to hear from you, right? So it's important. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I would say that it really depends on the person. There's some women like me who suffer during periods, not always, but often. And on days that I suffer, I don't want to do anything. The only thing that would work would be sitting in child's pose. Sometimes actually I sit in child's pose on my bed and sleep like that, with a hot towel on my low back or something. So nothing else can work. Just the compression and the idea of being hugged, even if I'm hugged by myself. There is this theory that in young classes is not so good to do intense inversions while you bleed. And again, I've heard from many women saying that one of the reasons they don't do it is because they don't feel so much in balance. And so they wouldn't be doing headstands, handstands, pinchers, and things like that. But other than that, the little bit of movement here and there, or the stretch on most days, maybe not on the most painful day, feel nice. Using your body in any way makes you feel good. Normally for me it's like 1 or 2 days that is like a no-go, and that would be just folding and staying there. And the other days I would practice mainly things with forward folds, things that are releasing the low back. And because I'm quite flexible, for me a deep forward fold is very releasing. When you know, for someone else maybe it would be horrible to start folding, and would want to just maybe do gentle twists like a supine twist or something more gentle.
And Ari in the comments, so we can get other women's opinions as well. Because I'm learning a lot, so I'm encouraged to hear more.
I can bring my voice into this and share what my own experience is. I think definitely a more, I do like yin, and I agree with for when you're bleeding. And definitely agree with Athena. I suffered quite a lot too. There's maybe like 2 days, one where it's, or on the run up, 2 days, 3 days on the run up before actually you start bleeding, where I know what my body's doing, is going into it. And I have rest days, and always the first day of the bleed, do nothing, just rest, just relax, just read, just be, I don't know, lie down in Shavasana, whatever you want, if you want to get on your mat. And then it's kind of gentle. Yin practice is really nice. So maybe not, I don't do things like a supported bridge or anything like that, like no sort of inversions. I personally feel, because it's kind of against the flow, so it's flowing out of you. So to do an inversion, like it's all then going to go in the wrong direction, and that's just kind of how I personally feel with it. So, you know, I quite like a, you know, like a supine butterfly, or just, you know, where you're just kind of opening up the heart and like the pelvic area, just to let all just flow freely. So very relaxing, more relaxing. Just go into the breath to help you with the pain as well. Send that breath down to that area, and then just let it go out. So I find that really helps. So deep breathing to help with the pain if you're cramping and things, and just very gentle yin, I find really helps that.
Amphibian is another incredible posture for that, because you're kind of opening to one side only. You're not tensing it too much. You're not, I don't know, I feel pretty much nothing in amphibian. Is pretty much my sleeping position. So again, is beautiful. I just love it.
Yeah. I agree.
Look, from an energetic perspective, what happens is that you want to let go of something. So I imagine that Yin Yoga is a good practice because it supports that kind of letting go quality. And at the same time, as you said, like stuff is flowing down. We don't want to have stuff too much up in the body or rising. So there's this pranic quality, which is called, I think, apana. Vayu is like the prana that happens more in the stomach area, like from down here. And that's activated by exhaling long, for example, or focusing just on the navel center and doing that practices that ground you and that like direct you downwards. And I think that could support. And I mean, you need care and softness at those times. And I think that's what Yin Yoga gives you if you don't do it extremely, or if you don't do the inversions or a big, like just heart openers. That would be counterproductive, in my opinion.
An incredible teacher to ask things like that. She has a lot of knowledge on anything related to the woman. Is Ellie, who was teaching the yin yang class earlier, and she had a feminine and masculine balance theory class yesterday. And she's amazing.
She's also into how to
balance it.
Yeah, to balance your cycle and your practice. So you support your cycle with your practice. That's how she has structured actually her teacher training.
We have an answer to that from Pia, saying that from spiritual thinking, it is better to be in your own energy at this time, because you're in a changing process, and so it is better not to be influenced by other people's energy. So maybe instead of attending a class in this time, it would be best to practice on your own. So if you're doing it online or from home, as you said, from videos, then that's probably great, because you really don't feel that tiny little pressure that Cedric was talking about, where other people are around you. You don't even have a hint of that. You're just on your own. You try posture, it doesn't work. You do another. You skip the video 5 minutes ahead, or take a little shavasana in between.
I think often the matter of shame is also involved in that, and yeah, the space of allowance should create that not shame feeling.
You know, I'm glad that the question was asked, particularly as a male teacher guide, who the demographics in my class are usually 70% women, and we are open to offering notes or precautions for things like, you know, if you suffer hypertension, you know, try not to don't hold the breath on a box breath, right? Or I've done a lot more training and things in terms of prenatal, postnatal, to think about, you know, precautions that we may have for women who in the class. But usually I've been approached by a woman before class to let me know she's pregnant, but almost I can say never has a woman come up and say, I am on my cycle, right? So I think it's beautiful that this question came forward, because it gives me something to think about in terms of not being afraid to offer, whether you want to call it modifications or suggestions, right, in class, to say, if you are pregnant, be cautious with this. If you are on your cycle, you know, this, allow your body to speak to you. Some of these may be comforting for some, but they may not be for others. So let your body guide. Always in my classes, I say, if you're not feeling this pose, lie down, right? Or sit up and take a break. You know, but I'm just really glad that this came up. It really challenges me to learn more, to know more, to be more open, to hear, and to be a better guide. So thank you for the question.
70%, you'll get to 99% women. You do that.
Well, I was trying to be generous. It's usually about 90% women, but I'm trying to get more men to come into classes as well. So fortunately, I mean, I would say that I probably, of the classes I teach, I do pull in probably a few more men than other classes. But yeah, I mean, it's the majority. I was trying to be generous, but 70 was a low ball figure. But yeah.
Oh, it's going to 99 soon.
Lucky you.
It's beautiful to have women around. So is there any other question that anyone has, or feedback from their own practice? Or even if someone is not a beginner, like feedback from what helped them to get out of the beginner's mind. And
share something, is that okay? So I have a dance background and trained in dance for many years since I was like 3. Never were we ever taught in dance, when we were doing warm-ups or stretches, like how to breathe. And then I must have been doing yoga for about 10 years before actually understanding the breath and connecting with the breath. And it just took one teacher, like 10 years later down the line, where the way that they transferred their knowledge of the breath, you know, and inhaling and exhaling, and how to get into a posture using the breath, just eventually just whoop, clicked into my whole being and all my systems. So now that's just taken me on an incredible journey. And then as I've wandered along the path of Yin and going in even deeper, and how the breath is like so vital for being able to get into those more uncomfortable places when you're in a Yin practice, and using the breath to actually journey into them. I just wanted to share that has been like the sort of greatest teaching for me so far, in the practice of the breath, and using the breath to really, really help be able to get in and like even access traumas that are like stored in the fascia, you know, whether that be emotional or physical, from say you've been in an accident, or and how fascinating that is to be able to access those areas and let them come up, and then using the breath to help process them, send them out. So for any beginners here, like for me personally, the breath has been a really amazing teacher. So I just wanted to share that with you on the breath.
Thank you.
Yeah, the breath is so powerful. And I find it interesting how different styles of yoga utilize the breath so differently, and yet it's all so powerful in any of them, which speaks more to what the breath is to us than the practices. But it's really fascinating to me how when people are beginners to yin yoga, that if they came from vinyasa or something where there's a inhale this, exhale that, and there's a lot of guiding of when you're breathing and how you're breathing, or pranayama. With yin, it's almost more just watch your breath. It's almost more like a meditation mindset. And so kind of teaching beginners to you're just watching, what's your breath doing? How does it feel? Is really feels so integral to really getting the most out of yin yoga.
Corina weaved into her yin class yesterday some Kapalabhati at the beginning and a deep, pretty much yogic breathing at the end. And yeah, it was for me the first time I was taking a yin class and had pranayama in it. It was interesting.
Yeah, Chrissy is doing that later too.
Yeah.
Yin pranayama and meditation.
Yeah.
Durga
There's
pranayama
another
really
question.
nicely.
Would TJ or Matthew, would you be happy to answer the question from the chat?
Yeah,
Pia?
I'd be happy to. And just before I do, I'm almost always have some pranayama, some breathing exercise, either at the beginning or just before Shavasana. I find it's a wise, particularly before Shavasana, we're starting to slow it down. So extending the exhales to set the conditions for rest, right? So at the beginning, it's usually a scan for resistance, right? And through the breath, maybe diaphragmatic breathing. But to Pia's question, and I understood what you meant. Interesting that you asked this, because there will be occasions, particularly sometimes in the fall or kind of equinox, change of seasons, I will do a month of classes where we will do the same pose, maybe not in the same order, but we'll do the same poses in every class for about a month. Because it's an invitation for people to really tune into their bodies, to move away from the judgment, and then maybe be surprisingly pleased by the reveal that comes over the period of time, where if they're moving into Paschimottanasana, they're seated caterpillar, right? So maybe they're upright, and then even if they're just 2 inches forward, it still feels like a sense of movement into their bodies and to openness. But always reminding people that your experience is what it is. And so if you can remove the expectation of some other destination, you may, there may not be a discernible difference from the beginning of the month to the end, but maybe you just feel more in tune to your body. So I think sometimes it is good to repeat, but it's just the world we live in. People are like, I want something different every time. And I feel that pressure as a guide. I'm like, well, what did I start writing down my classes, which I never did before. I just teach very intuitively, but since we've been doing all virtual, it's hard to kind of feel the energy from people in the room and kind of sense what's needed that day. But I've kind of balanced this thing about how much do I do the same, how much, because there is kind of I won't say a finite, but there's kind of there's a universe of poses that we do in yin yoga, right? So there's not like, in anything, even in Bikram, there's 26 poses, what's coming, right? So it's, I think that's, take the controversy of Bikram aside, the poses are
Ashtanga.
But the poses are the same every time. So what's coming, but you feel something different every time. So I think that if you're beginning, sometimes I think it is good to repeat those poses. But as you can repeat them without judgment, if you complete them, you can complete them and move through them without the need to experience something different, right? And so that's when the kind of the magic of reveal happens, is when you stop setting the waypoints. And so, Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I do offer variety just because it's interesting for people to open to their shoulders in a different way, closed wing, open wing, different things. We do one under the back. Long-winded answer to say yes.
I sometimes like to think of, it might depend too on what Pia is thinking in terms of like a home practice or how to decide what she should practice every day or what to do. But like for myself, like my home practice, like I have certain things I like to do with students and classes in terms of what poses to pick or when or how to repeat. For myself, like I treat it more diagnostically. I like to use that term. I don't know why. Like it makes me feel like a car. Like we're gonna figure out what we need today, get under the hood. But like each day when I practice, like it's often the same poses. Like I tend to gravitate towards certain poses. My body's just like, we just want to do this today. Let's go. But then there's other poses where I'm like, we haven't done this in a while. And I'll try it and I'll be like, whoa, we need to do this one every day. Because your body's just like, you didn't know you were craving it, but then you try it out just kind of to experiment and mix it up a little. And so it kind of, it can change or it can be the same. It depends on what my body is feeling in terms of like personal practice. So that can be a way to approach it as well. Ari, you?
Can I ask a question? Just on the same sort of topic. So to both to anyone who wants to answer. So you think so if you're repeating poses and doing the same ones, like I really like what you're doing there, Matthew, of like doing the same ones throughout a month. That's like really getting to know like what's going on in your body and understanding your body in those particular positions and postures. But I suppose it's almost like I want to ask if you think it's almost like teaching the body and the muscles to have a memory of where you're traveling to, and like each time your destination maybe getting a little bit deeper, a little bit different. I don't know how to word this correctly because the thoughts are kind of coming as I'm going. So it's like a sort of a muscle memory, so a teaching of the body, which is allowing the space to get in even deeper into those postures by the repetition of that. Does that make sense to anyone? Can someone like
that in more clarity?
It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense, but I think that what came immediately to mind is a reminder that I often give to students, but to myself for my own self practice, which is we could do the same pose day after day after day, and you're going to perhaps feel something different. Your access, your capacity will be different from day to day. So can you rest in this moment with what is, right? Because we start then evaluating, judging, critiquing. Well, yesterday or last week, my forehead was on my shins, right? And then today, I can't seem to but just creep forward 2 inches. And so again, it's releasing the backstory, a release of the need to know why, and just sit with what is, right? And so that is the kind of mental emotional practice that comes along with Yin for me, is to really train myself to release. I'm one of these curious people. I always want to know why. I'm a why person. Why, I want to know the answers. But as I said, to response to Pia's question, I don't know is a perfectly valid answer. And so it is just what do I feel, as opposed to so much more feeling and maybe a lot less thinking, right? And so let's feel into this practice, right? So
based on what you're saying and Pia's question, and coming back to the bleeding question, a woman when the fertile window is on is much more likely to feel more flexible and actually be more flexible. So it's also super interesting to try some postures on a week during bleeding, and then 2 weeks later when you're in that fertile window, it's the body's just reacting so much more like it's dough. It's so much softer than during bleeding. So I'd say it's very interesting to try and keep a little mental note of, oh, how did my body feel today? Oh, look, I'm doing the same posture. How is my body feeling today? It's a great change that is just happening without you doing anything different, just your body being different.
That's beautiful.
Good.
I often use the expression about mental notes, right? So particularly from two-sided postures to make mental notes. But I love that because as much as I said, not getting caught in the backstory, it is good to make mental notes about where you are today in your body in
How do I
terms of
feel?
what's
Yeah,
happening.
not
Right.
where I'm getting, but
Right.
what do I feel? Do I feel it on my
No,
legs,
I
on
think
my
that's
back?
brilliant. Yeah.
I have to slowly announce that we have to come to an end because the next class is starting.
Slowly announce.
And I gave you the control, TJ.
I have to leave as well. I'm in the next thing in the premium class.
Yes.
Nice.
So I will, yeah, good. So I hope that you could take some ideas with you, and thank you from my side. And I will leave.
I mean, yeah, if anybody has a question that did not feel quite comfortable putting in this chat, obviously feel free to just reach out. I am sure all of the teachers are happy to answer questions and be in contact for anything regarding this practice. So
yeah, like anytime, reach out. We are accessible.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm gonna head out now too.
Okay, great. Bye, everyone.
Bye.